Thank you, Governor. It's a great honor to be here tonight as a Missouri Republican to welcome a great American leader like Governor Barbour. We're honored to have you in Missouri. I must beg your pardon at the outset if my voice fails, because I do have a bad throat, and I've been living on cold medicine and lozenges for 2.5 days. But I want to talk to you from the heart tonight, and I want to talk to you about a journey that I've taken since my boyhood days. Growing up in a little town in southeast Missouri called Cape Girardeau, and the son of a set of parents who were apolitical, a pediatrician who had no real orientation toward this business, a man of science, unlike his third son, and tends to be a man of words. My dad was a man of science. But there was a curious coincidence growing up in that town. His fellow veteran from the China-Burma-India theater, his closest friend and his attorney, was a fellow named Rush Limbaugh Jr. Were they alive today, they would be 90. So Rush Jr. is the father of the guy you hear on the radio, who is Rush III. And there were in the two Limbaugh families, first cousins. There were 3 boys and 2 boys, and there were 4 kinder boys. So there were 9 boys, not a sister among us, who all grew up like brothers. Well, I began to get interested in this business that you and I are here about tonight in the early primary grades. The campaign was the Goldwater campaign. And I remember hearing Mr. Rush hold forth about it. And I can tell you that when you listen to his son, I can hear the old man booming out through his son 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. It had a great impression on me. I became interested. And because Mrs. Limbaugh was running the Republican headquarters, I walked down every day after school in those primary grade in the fall of 1964 and stuffed envelopes for Barry Goldwater. And then 4 years later, there was a campaign for the presidency in which we had a contest on our side, and there was a guy named Nixon running, and there was a guy named Rockefeller running, and there was a newly elected governor from California. And I was in the 8th grade, and I began reading about Governor Reagan, and I said, that's my man. I want Governor Reagan for president in '68 in the 8th grade. And he didn't make it, and we go forward 8 years, and there's another contest. And this story has a peculiar attachment to Springfield, Missouri. Because I came over here as a college student and rented a room for $16 a night at the Railhaven Motel to be a delegate for Ronald Reagan in June of 1976 at the famous convention at the old Shrine Mosque just down the street, the unair-conditioned Shrine Mosque. It was 96 degrees inside there. And I had received a call earlier that week, from my friend Jack Danforth, for whom I had been a driver a couple of years earlier in his campaign for re-election as Attorney General, urging me to be for Mr. Ford. And I listened respectfully and declined. And I said, I'm standing by my man, Ronald Reagan. I've been with him 8 years, and I'm going to stay with him. And I stayed with him, and we had a great victory here in Springfield and went on to the national convention and fell just short. I remember Reagan stood in front of his supporters the morning after that and said, I'll lay me down and bleed a while, quoting the lines of the Scottish poet. I'll lay me down and bleed a while. Though I am wounded, I am not slain. I shall rise and fight again. And fight again he did, of course, 4 years later. And 4 years later, I was newly out of school and managing a congressional campaign in 1980 for the first Republican to win in southeast Missouri in 52 years, since 1928, Bill Emerson. Went to Washington with him, worked 15 months on his staff there before it was time to come home and run the second campaign. Also a very difficult one. It was about a 3.5 to 1 Democratic district. There was only one Republican state rep in 19 counties of that old district. We prevailed. Why did we prevail? Because we were about a cause larger than self, larger than one person. We were about the family that is and the cause that is the Missouri Republican Party that I have been about all these years. And I spent some time in private industry, in a succession of a couple, 3 different jobs, and in '92 a Senate seat came open, state Senate seat came open in southeast Missouri. And I faced off against our former First Lady, Betty Hearns. And you may remember, Kit, '92 was not the banner year for Republicans in Missouri. Let's face it, it was a catastrophic year. But other than electing Kit Bond, the whole state ticket was wiped out, and there were very few bright spots. Steve Ailman won a newly redrawn state Senate seat in St. Charles County, and my win of a state Senate seat against the First Lady, Mrs. Hearns, in outstate Missouri, was the beginning of the Republican comeback in our state. I went to Jefferson City and looked around the state Senate, and there were 13 Republicans out of 34. The Democrats had a big majority in the House. They had every executive office except one, the governor, everything. And so I rolled up my sleeves and spent the '90s trying to build a Republican majority, and it was 1 step forward and 2 steps back too often. And we had the best Republican National Committee chairman of my lifetime, Haley Barbour, installed that year. And under the great leadership of this great leader, we had an awesome resurgence nationwide in Missouri in '94. But sadly, that tide, that rising tide, largely passed us by. We elected John Ashcroft to the Senate, but we did not make major gains as they did in Ohio and Illinois and Michigan and Pennsylvania and everywhere else. So it was very frustrating. We actually lost a state Senate seat that year. I believe it was the only state Senate seat a Republican lost in America. We lost it. But finally in '01, the table was set, and we won 2 out of 3 seats and went up with a majority for the first time in 53 years. I became the first Republican president pro tem in 53 years. I faced a Democratic House, a Democratic governor, and the challenge of proving to Missourians that this strange creature called a Republican leading a legislative chamber in Missouri could be a responsible fellow. Well, through some combination of good policy made good politics, because in every subsequent election we increased our majority so that when I left in '04 to assume this job as a member of the team that took over in January '05, the Republican majority in the Senate was the highest percentage in the history of Missouri at 23 Republicans and 11 Democrats. And we had been joined by the historic arrival of the Republican House that allowed us, after putting those bills on a governor's desk in '03 and '04 who would veto them, Bob Holden, I happen to believe it's one of the main reasons the people vetoed him in '04 at the first opportunity. We put those bills in the winter of '05 on the desk of a Governor Blunt who would sign them. And they have turned around our business climate and our investment climate and created 90,000 jobs. And I salute you, Governor, for that. Why mention all that? And I'm sweetest words any audience can hear are in conclusion, and I'm nearing my conclusion. Why mention all that? The reason to mention all that is to say that since my earliest days of involvement, the reason for being involved has been larger than any one person. It has been emphatically not about me. It's about the cause you and I share. And it's about preventing the fate that awaits Missouri if Jay Nixon ever becomes governor of this state. I do not want to see that day. Now, 16 or 17 days ago, when the governor shocked us all with his announcement, I launched my candidacy for that office. I am here today to tell you that after visiting with friends and being gratified by their support all across this state, grassroots volunteers, office holders, fundraisers, captains of industry, people in the street, and being humbled by their support, that I will nonetheless stand down from the governor's race here tonight in the interest of the larger cause that you and I share. I will run for re-election as lieutenant governor. I will run the strongest possible race I can. I will take the game to the other team, and we will win this election in November. Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to that kind of ovation someday when I announce for a higher office. I'll just say this. The record of the last 3 years is not one to be shrunk from. It will have, as it deserves, an energetic defense, a vigorous defense, a positive vision, a positive leadership for Missouri, and I'm dedicated to that cause in 2008. Thank you.